Hey guys, so I've already done a few videos about the Scorp Hermod here, modular sequencer. It's pretty cool. It's kind of the key to my, as you can see, really small setup. And I've had a few people ask for some more information on one, just how to build a song on the sequencer, because it can be a little bit tricky. And then two, for some information about Euclidean sequencers and maybe even some generative stuff. I touched on that in another video, but maybe we'll get into it in this video. My goal today is to show how to build a quick song, just kind of that whole process, start to finish, do multiple song sections, chain them together, and then also to kind of touch on the Euclidean stuff. So let's get into it. I'm hopefully going to do it in about 10 or 15 minutes and explain it at the same time, so we'll see. It might go a little bit long, and I might make editing hard on myself, but we'll see how it goes. Cool. So I think the first key to making a song easily and quickly on the Hermod, as with most music technology, is templates. You can save a template by using the underscore. So whatever you save as the underscore is what turns on when this loads. And for me, that's a pretty basic setup. Here I have my Dave Smith Instruments Tetra on the first channel. I have, so these are all MIDI synths extra. I have my Roland Juno on the second channel. Third channel is this Moog Grandmother that you can kind of see the edge of in the video right here. I'm actually using that through the device port and not the normal MIDI chain, just because that's kind of the way everything worked out with my wiring, but you can route any of those MIDI synths anywhere. These are all set up using the MIDI output effect, and then have an old Yamaha FB01 FM synthesis module out of frame, and then I also have Korg M3R, which is an old digital Korg module that, I can swap the output on those. So that kind of puts all of my MIDI synths together on that front row. And then here on channel 6, I'm going to the mutable instruments plates, which could give us a kick drum sound, hi-hat, whatever. I'm using it kind of as a drum voice in this, and that's patched through a filter and then kind of to an output module with reverb in case it's a hi-hat or something, but it's all turned off right now. So that's my template. Whenever I load things up, that's kind of just how things are worked. You can see I already have this wired. One other cool note when using this with other modules is you can set the gate output here on the Hermod by hitting Y. You can set all your clock in, clock out, MIDI in, MIDI out effects. You can set, let's see, that's clock in, clock out right there. Hold on, let me get this mic a little bit closer so I can talk as I do all this stuff. So clock in, clock out, you can scroll down here. Interesting. I gotta switch left-handed so you guys can see what's going on. CV clock out. So when you click this, you can actually select any of the G, which means gate. So you can set that gate out. So you can be sending a clock to other modules like this trigger man I have here, and hopefully we'll pull that in later. But I always kind of have that wired in because I can use that to then kind of do some other gate sequencing if I run out of room here. So as I just explained, on the top level, I have all my MIDI synths. On the bottom level, I have most of my modular stuff set up. So the key to getting up and running very quickly is to having a setup that works, and then you can adjust on the fly as needed. If you need more MIDI synths or if you want to do more of a modular setup, you can kind of eat into each direction, and that's totally fine. Okay, so let's get started with some actual notes to build our song. I'm going to put my track on track 1, which is my Dave Smith polysynth down here, and I'm going to go into step mode. Now I'm going to show you the new looper feature they added by holding X and hitting record. It's now waiting to record, and when I play a first note, it will record the sequence. When I play the second note, it will set the tempo, set the pattern length, and then start looping what I just played, which is basically how a lot of loopers work, but instead of audio, it's actually looping my MIDI data here, which is cool. You can hold Y and hit O, and instead of waiting, it'll start recording immediately if you're not playing on the downbeat, but this is the mode I'm showing, so let's get to it. Cool, so you see we have our loop. I'm going to go into the MIDI effect, and I'm going to quantize it, just in case I was a little bit off on my playing or a little bit off on where I set that loop length, since I'm doing a lot of effects on this. So one cool thing you can do is come in and add an arpeggiator. So you can take a basic pattern that you played and already kind of translate it. We can turn that off for now just by pressing the button that corresponds with where that effect is. Great. So now I want to take the chance to demo the Euclidean sequencer for this bass line. So instead of playing a bass line or having to program it in here, a really cool way you can do it is with the Euclidean effect. So I like to place a note, hold that note, and then set the note length by tapping that to get down to note length and set it to the 8-bar pattern. So the Euclidean effect, as I understand it, only plays when a note is being played. So by making one note that spans the whole pattern, you can really split this whole bar and use the Euclidean effect as it was intended. And I'm also going to hold this and drag it, oh, not that. Drag the note down because it's going to be a really high note. So let's, so I'm going to go to effects. Instead of arpeggiator, come down to Euclid. So kind of tune that. So what you see here is it's 4/8. So it's 8 beats and it will divide those 4 notes evenly, kind of giving me this 8th note effect. So unusual patterns kind of give you more of a syncopated feel, 5 or 7. So I kind of like that 5/8 feel, so I'm going to keep that. Cool. And then one thing you can do, I kind of mentioned earlier, using this gate to this Triggerman sequencer, I can come down here and expand kind of the pattern of that. So I don't know if you can see, but the pattern of those dots is what comes out of here. And I can take that to the harmonic input here on my... So I don't know if you can hear, but that's kind of a accents some of those patterns. You could also do that just using gates already here on another track that you weren't using. So if you don't have an external sequencer like that, don't worry. You can manually put those in. You could even do 2 Euclid effects kind of beating off each other where they're doing this pattern where one is longer and more extended. So you would get this kind of constantly generating pattern, which would be really cool. But as that goes, I kind of like that feel. Cool. So now I've got a kick drum, that pattern. We can add a bass note in real quick. And one thing I will say about creating a song totally on the Hermod is that it's kind of based around these sequences, right? And each one is totally independent. So the way that I typically do it is to build up kind of the core of my song on one, duplicate it to the others, and change things as I go for, you know, a verse section, a chorus, maybe a little bridge. And I think that's probably as far as we'll go in this video, so don't waste your time too much on a half thought out song idea. But because you're copying that, you're also copying the effects. So anything you start doing over here with patching or getting really complicated CV inputs and outputs, you're going to want to copy that with all of that config. Because normally I find this chain of like 3 effects kind of builds a root weird sound. And so to have that on one track and then not have it in the other is a little weird. So compositionally, you could do them totally independent and their song could sound totally different between them. I feel like it's nice to have a little bit of similar sonic glue. So I kind of set up my patches. You can change things or pull things out and move them to totally other synths or something track-wise. But that's kind of my approach, is to get the core of a song, duplicate it, modify it for the next part, modify it again for a bridge, and kind of keep stepping through, and then go back and make it feel coherent, and make it build up, come down, do all those things. Okay, so let's come back, add a bass line. So now I'm on track 2, which is my Roland Juno. So I might play a bass note down here. So I'll hit record. Cool, that has us in business there. And now I might just add a little bit of a lead on the Moog. So I might go ahead and trigger an arpeggiator. great. So that kind of works. I might tweak my sound a little bit. So that's me messing with the LFO over there, so it kind of comes in and out. So it's not so very static. It kind of comes in waves up and down. And for different song sections, you know, I can manipulate that. So I can take it from a gentle effect to more of a big one. So that's a big part of the way I perform with this, is to set up song sections and then play it back. And as I'm playing it back, manipulate synth parameters to give each song section more of a more structure to it, more of a different feel. This is big, this is small, this is distorted, things like that. So it's very hands-on for me. I'll build the song typically all DAW-less, I guess you would say, with the squirt being the brain. And then at the end of the process, I almost always flip it and sync it to Logic. So I'll have Logic output a MIDI clock through the USB device, have Hermod sync to that at the same tempo I already set here, which, yeah, let's see that. Cool. And then when I do that, I will record all the tracks back in. And I'll play them back. So I have this audio all synced to a clock, so I can kind of rearrange it even in the DAW after I do this MIDI performance. So I can even do a few takes of each song section, have them up, have them down, have a lot of options to work with, and then kind of use cutting and pasting in the DAW to kind of bring my track together and bring it along with, you know, other acoustic instruments, things that cannot be sequenced, and give it a little bit more life that way. So that's my approach. It's really great that it's so flexible. You can sync it to or from anything. So this could drive your DAW. You could be sequencing virtual instruments with this. The sky is really the limit. It's almost the problem. So having good templates, like I mentioned earlier, will keep you moving the right direction, actually getting stuff done, not being lost in all the possible things that you could do with this, which is a lot. Cool. So let's move on. Actually, one thing I want to mention, I may redo this part. I think I actually played a little early. If you look at the step sequencer, you'll notice you don't hear it at the start. I think I played the notes kind of at the end of the pattern there, so when it loops, it latches on right. So I'm going to redo that one. What's happening here is in the step sequencer, I'm playing a hair early on that arpeggiator, so that note's not getting recorded. It's actually getting recorded again when I kind of replay that at the end. So you want to be careful and do it just right on the beat or right after the beat, because otherwise you're going to miss it getting recorded there on the start of the beat. So when you start, your pattern will be a little different than it is at the end for these things that are constant notes that span the whole thing. Pads, arpeggios, I always put in just by hand for the Euclid effect, because if there's even like a half beat drop, sometimes you may miss a beat in the effect. So you really want those to be precise. So let's try this one more time. Helps to play the right notes. There is a shortcut that was recently added to delete all events. I have totally forgotten it. Maybe I'll look it up and put it in the video. If you know it, put it in the comments, because that would be way more helpful than having to menu dive that every time. That's another fun note, is with the arpeggiator. If you're off, then your notes are off. It doesn't sync to the clock. It's all relative to when you start the note, which is fine until you miss the note. So when I use the arpeggiator, I almost always come in and in the MIDI effect, we'll set it to 16th notes or whatever, you know, my beat is. Okay, I think I got it there. If not, we're going to move on. Okay, so here's how to take your song sections and start to make a B section. So here, you could copy the sequence, but I'm going to hit duplicate 2, and now it will wait for you to hit a button. It's going to duplicate it to number 2, and when this moves over, there, now we're on sequence 2. It's copied from... We're on sequence 2, it's copied from sequence 1, but we never had to stop playing it. So duplicate 2, and then you pick the next pad. I think it will overwrite whatever's there if something's already there. And then that's how you have two song sequences playing. And then with stuff playing, I can come here. This is where that shortcut would be really useful if I knew it. So I'm just deleting every event on the harmonic tracks. There we go. So now all we have left is our kick drum, which still has that Euclidean effect. So you can come here. Make it 3/8. So a syncopated feel still, but different. So this might be our chorus, let's say. An easy thing might be to record a slightly different arpeggio with a different pattern. And let's do the length, double the number of bars to give some variation. So instead of a single bar of 8 beats, we're going to do 2 bars at 16. And if you watch this right here, you can see when you start over. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, and if you see there, I actually missed the start yet again. So come in, delete. Man, I do need to learn that shortcut. Please let me know if you know it. That would save some time. And I did it again. Man. Okay, let's start again. 1. Cool. So there you see we have a new pattern recorded. I did that because I thought, having those arpeggios might sync the tempo a little better with that kind of syncopated kick drum. So now I might lay a bass down underneath that. Back on my Juno. Go on. All right. And so the easiest way is to... Oh, got to make that track length longer. Maybe the polysynth on that. Go ahead and make it 16 beats. Cool. And then I'm actually going to add an effect on the polysynth, so not an arpeggiator, but a Euclid effect. So this, oh, hit the wrong button. So this might be really cool. So as long as those notes are held out, it will do those patterns that you have set. So that's a simple 4. Could try a 5. So even if you're playing a chord, it will just play all of those. Let's see. Take it. Maybe I'll try to do that mid-range. Okay, so let's try that. Maybe the 5 over the 3 might give a really cool syncopation. And so just like that, we have an A and a B section. And if you hit them, it will wait. You can program it to switch immediately, but I kind of like waiting. And it waits until the end of this loop. Let's see. This loop parameter. Shoot, how do I set that? There you go. If you hold X, you can set the length of that loop parameter. So my first pattern is only 8 beats, but my second one is 16. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to 16. So it'll play that first one twice before it will sync over to the next one. And that's so I don't cut myself short if I'm swapping back. You can leave that as short as long as you want. It really depends on the song you're looking for. And let me go ahead and do even a third pattern. That's just going to be an extension of this second one, but just maybe really big on the kick drum. That's just all out. So let's play. Duplicate 2, 3. And actually, I duplicated the wrong one, so let's see if it does overwrite. So if I play 2, duplicate that, 2, 3. At the end of the 16 beats, it will put me on 3, starting with that. So I'm going to go ahead and modify just that Euclid effect. So this is going to be like a really big hit where everything's firing. Fills. So you hear the Tetra right there is firing on every note with that Euclid effect. And you can put that, anything can control that. I've done it from an LFO, so you can change how many hits over a long period of time. You can have it be a slow ramp up. You can map it to just a single knob and slowly just increase how many hits and step through these different sequence patterns on the way up. It's very cool and flexible. And that's all accessed from the mod matrix. If you do effects, Y, you can set something in to affect the Euclid. Let's see. I think I scrolled way past it. Let's make sure I'm on the right track. Oh, I'm not. That would do it. So here on a track with the Euclid effect, you can set anything from CV ends right here to CC1, which is the mod wheel, any of these MIDI CC controllers to affect that. And then you can run it and control any of those Euclid parameters. Let's see. Euclid steps, fills. So you can control how many fills fall in that Euclid pattern based on this. You can make it be really sparse and just hit every first note. You can control the rate, how fast they're hitting, the gate length, how long they stay open, the rotation, where that pattern is. It'll actually shift it left and right. I haven't even gotten into that. So, I mean, this one effect has all kinds of possibilities. Gate mod, that changing over time, the modulation speed, all of that. But let's just right now say the fills. So if you do that, oh shoot, I'm having trouble remembering how this works. Okay, so here in the mod matrix, there is a way to set that. Let's actually say we wanted our CVA input, and I'll just run a LFO into that from the Basel Instruments Tromso over here. I think it's just a triangle LFO. That sets CVA controls how many fills that has. But if you actually hit down here, there's a kind of a second hidden mode, and I actually just forgot how to do it, and I basically forget it every time. But if you hit 5 for channel 1, or 5 for mod matrix 1, 6 for mod matrix 2, 7 for mod matrix 3, you get the second mode, which is really cool. You can actually control the attenuvert version. So if you look right there, you can see it changing as it ramps up to 5, 6, 7, 8, the number of fills. So I'm going to mute the other parts. Back in the mod matrix, this kind of attenuvert window, you can see it 1 hit, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So as that LFO goes up and down, the hits in that section go up and down. And you can offset that, or you can attenuvert it. So you can have it up 100, negative 100. So this, in a small setup, can save you so much space with not having to have attenuverters. You can just take raw LFO outputs, or even LFOs from itself back into it. If you don't have a lot of LFOs, you can set up a mod track with an LFO and take it right back into the Hermod and use that to do really, really cool synced effects. I don't think it'll do over gain 100, so you can't take a really small signal, but taking a full range signal gives you these great options. So you hear that it's kind of humanized. It's not just one pattern. It's kind of changing those patterns as it goes. And if I increase the LFO, it can become more or less predictable. If I turn the other tracks back on, cool. And then I'm gonna do one more thing, come down to track 6 where my kick drum is, modify that Euclid effect again, but just make all the fills. And just make that really big. So that's sequence 3. Sequence 2 is that same pattern but smaller, and sequence 1 is the original. So now we can come into how we make a song. And that is by pressing X in song mode. And you can press pattern, I'm trying to keep my hands out of the screen so you guys can see it. You can press pattern 1 again, pattern 2, then pattern 3. So now we built, and actually pressing X again gets rid of it. So pattern 1 twice, pattern 2, and pattern 3, and then it will start the cycle over again. Loop sequence 1, 2, and then 3. And I'm going to go ahead and play that back with some of the tracks disabled. So the drums and the arpeggio on the Moog turned off at the start. So you can hear how that started back over. So that will just loop. If you hit X, it gets rid of that song. You can just trigger those by hand if you prefer. But again, my flow is get the song, figure out what I want, and then you kind of heard some of the parameters almost out of camera. I was, messing with the release, messing with the cutoff, messing with some of the LFO settings on the other synths to build these song sections. So I'm not having to worry about playing the notes. I'm able to kind of do more of the expressive part of those instruments and record them. And my main flow is to, again, sync this to Logic, play, multiple passes of my song section, do an up version, a down version, a version where everything's just distorted. The more effects you have on here, you can actually go in and modify the effects for the different passes, especially if you're triggering it by hand. So it's just up to you how much of it you want to nail down on one take and then record stuff over, or how much you want to put these pieces on and let you reassemble them. Something like Ableton might even be better than that. In Logic, I kind of do it by hand, taking chunks of tracks and chunks of bars and song sections. But in Ableton, you might even be able to record them as clips. Bump the camera. In a future video, I'd like to maybe figure out how to do MIDI recording. That's one thing I've yet to figure out in Logic. So that way, in addition to the audio, you can have the raw MIDI of these if you wanted to replay something through a synth or put it into an analog or into a virtual synth. Yeah, so I hope that cleared up how I take a song kind of through one song section, making it multiple, doing modifications, using some of the different effects in the Hermod as compositional tools. This has really opened up my workflow and taken it from a computer-based setup where I was trying to play things through live all the time to a more sequence setup where I can use the effects and do more planned composition and then modify the synth parameters as a second layer. So I feel like it's really opened up the sound of my synths and given me a lot more possibilities. We could spend all day talking about all the different possibilities, but hopefully this gave you an idea of how to build a song on this sequencer and how to interface it with some of these other modules. And yeah, please add any tips or tricks in the comments. I appreciate you watching and looking over at how long I took to record this. I'm going to have to do some serious editing, so I hope it wasn't too long. And thanks for watching and sticking through it if it ends up being way too long. Thank you so much. Bye.